Hello everybody, welcome back to Kanga TV, home of North Melbourne fans, and welcome to another Q&A here on the channel. It's been almost 7 months since I launched Kanga TV, and we are 8 or 9 rounds into the season, depending on how you look at it. So I thought I would open up the floor to you guys. I would answer some of your questions. It is still crazy to me that people want to hear my opinion on certain topics about North Melbourne. I thank you all so much for your support all the time. I genuinely couldn't be doing this without you. It feels like a massive dream come true, and it's such a pleasure to be able to have videos like this and have opportunities like this to talk to you guys, whether it be on videos or on Instagram lives or at the games. So without you guys and without your support, none of this would be possible. So I wanted to open the floor to you guys today. We've obviously got a really nice extended 9-day break between games, so I thought I'd use that opportunity to answer some of your burning questions. Some of them are related to 2025, some of them are related to North Melbourne in general. So hopefully you enjoy, hopefully you learn something new, and we can open the floor for a further discussion down below in the comments. If you like this video, please don't forget to like and subscribe to Kanga TV. Like I said, all these little things do help grow the channel, so I really appreciate all of that and everything you guys have done for me up until this point. Anyway, let's get straight into your questions. I hope you enjoy. Some of you guys have asked a few questions, and some of the questions are similar, so I'm going to group a few together where possible. I thought I would start off with Brighton. Brighton's got a few questions for me. How are you feeling, Mons, and how do you see things turning around for North this year? Favourite part of the season so far? Who's leading the BNF, and what's next for Kanga TV? So there's quite a few questions there. I'll group a few together. I'm awesome. I'm really, really great. Like I said, with Kanga TV, it's been almost 7 months since I started, and if you had told me that I would accomplish a quarter of the things that I have been able to achieve in the last 7 months, I probably never would have believed you. I think my favourite part of the season that relates to Kanga TV, and then I'll talk about on-field obviously as well, is going to the games and seeing some of you guys in the Kanga TV caps. I've bumped into some of you wearing them either by accident, by chance, or on purpose, and it actually blows me away. I bumped into a couple of people at the Good Friday game, at the end of the Good Friday game, and I was depressed, like all of you were probably, and I was super dehydrated because it was so hot in there. But as I was walking out of the aisle I was sitting in, I just literally walked smack bang into someone wearing a Kanga TV hat, and I actually was lost for words, and I didn't really know what to say. And it's those things, it's the tangibles that you feel like you're doing something good and you feel like you're making a difference, and then it's not until you meet somebody at a game where you see them wearing a cap and you're just like, wow, like this is real. You get messages a lot saying you saw me at games but you didn't want to come up and say hello or anything. Like, please know, like, if you guys come up to me and say hello at games, like that means the world to me, because like I said, it makes me feel, and it reassures and reaffirms that what I'm doing is the right thing, because it's impacting all of you guys watching at home on a week-to-week basis. So that's sort of what I've kind of want to tie everything in. In terms of what's next for Kanga TV, I'd love to take Kanga TV on the road at some stage this year. I'd love to get to a couple of interstate games if I can. I'm going to wait until the fixture is released the second half of the year. I don't think I'll be doing WA, but potentially Sydney is on the agenda, maybe Canberra, maybe Tassie. So we'll see. That's what I'd love to do before the end of the year. And really this year is just for me about trying a bunch of different things and experimenting things and seeing how they go and seeing where we land. So not too many plans for the better. I think I'm just keeping my options open and seeing how we go. In terms of North and in terms of how we turn things around, I think since the Carlton game, the last 2 games, I know it's been very frustrating having 2 narrow losses, but I would take those performances over the Good Friday game any day of the week, because we're actually putting ourselves in positions to win. And I think that continuity and consistency in the 23 that take the field each week, bar forced changes through injury or suspension or that sort of thing, I think that's going to be a really big key for us. And I also think that the defensive pressure that's come up the ground over the past couple of weeks in particular has also been critical for us, and I think we just really need to up the ante a little bit. The next couple of steps, I think, is mental. I think a lot of why we're not winning games is because mentally we haven't found a way to win yet, because we have been down the bottom of the ladder for so long and have really struggled for so long. So I think the additions of Parker and Darling and Daniel, like these guys who have been in winning environments. That's, a big reason as to why we've brought them into the side and we play them every single week. So I think those things in particular are probably a big start. Hopefully self-belief follows, and I think first quarters as well, being able to actually win a first quarter or two, just give ourselves a bit of confidence from the start and not feel like we're always trying to play catch up in every game, because inevitably it's just not working. You wonder how a few of these games would have gone throughout the year if we had actually got a better start from the word go. So that's sort of what I think about North turning things around in terms of leading the best and fairest so far. I think Paul Curtis would probably be leading the best and fairest at this stage of the season. I don't know how the 3-week suspension will impact him, but I would say he's probably up there. I'd say Luke Parker is probably up there as well. They've probably made 2 picks so far this season for the best and fairest. And in terms of favourite part of the season on field, I mean, no one's going to go past the Melbourne game, obviously. It was such an awesome feeling. I was definitely riding a massive high for about 3 days straight after that. But the other one for me was probably Jack Darling kicking his first goal as a North Melbourne player, and the way he celebrated with the crowd and saluted the crowd, and the roar that went around Marvel Stadium at that game against the Bulldogs was pretty special. Everyone knows I've taken such a big liking to Jack Darling, so that moment was really special. I know how much it would have meant to him, and I think it meant a lot to supporters as well. So yeah, they're probably a few of my favourite moments and bits and pieces from the season. Okay, next question. Being 1-7, do you think trading our first round pick is going to haunt us? PS, love your work. Thank you so much. I don't think so. And Look, I think there's so many layers to this question. I think the game that we saw Matt Whitlock play, he was really impressive. I think there were definitely some signs of the kind of player we have on our hands already. I think he's going to be really versatile. He's going to be really important for us in years to come. He signed a contract extension at the end of last week. I think that probably further, echoes that sentiment. But I think for the last few seasons, we've had quite a few picks in the top sort of 2 or 3 players, and we've taken midfielders. They've been the best available players. And I think now we've got a problem where we have so many similar players, but we were really taking best available talent at the time. I think that from a messaging point of view, that move signified to me as a supporter that we're kind of ready to go. There's still a long time to play out in this season, and I'm definitely willing to back the club in to make that decision. I guess the only thing that maybe makes me feel otherwise is I believe this coming draft, there are a few key position players that will be taken in sort of the top 10 to 15 players. So we probably could have pounced on one of them then, but I also look at the key position players that we have on our list, particularly the big men we have on our list, and a lot of those guys were either traded in from other clubs or were taken later picks in the draft. So I don't think that it's going to be detrimental to us and to our development moving forward. And I definitely back in the young talent that we do have on our list already to kind of start to fill those gaps as the seasons go on. Greatest winning goal you have seen? Corey Jones versus Sydney, Makepeace versus Port, any others? My favourite goal, match winning goal that I've ever seen, I don't really want to count the 2014 elimination final and the Drew Petrie goals. I don't think that would be fair. My favourite match winning goal was Jack Zeeble in 2018 against the Bulldogs. I think a few reasons. Jack Zeeble was one of my favourite players at North Melbourne at his time at North, so that was probably one of the reasons why I just love Jay-Z so much. I think the way we won that game, it was just such a scrappy passage of play, but everything just kind of fell in the right way. And C, it was in an era of Brad Scott where we were struggling to win the close ones. Like we had a fair few seasons where we just could not win the close games. And so those things all probably accumulated. I was also there. That was at Marvel Stadium. The others were away. We had that Mason Wood goal against Sydney as well. I think that was 2018 or maybe 2019 as well. That was also an epic win. But that was in Sydney as well. So I think naturally I'm, being at the game and at the ground and the way the crowd just lifted was something quite unbelievable. So that is always the first one that sticks to mind. The Cam Zurhaar, King of Marvel, is also the other one. Obviously not having won a game for so long, and that was Patch Adams' first game in charge. It was also the first win that I went to with my brother and my dad post-COVID. And so I think that was also quite unbelievable. The only difference with that one is I think it came with still like 2 minutes to go in the game, whereas the Zebra one came with like 15 seconds to go. So there's a couple of my favorites. I would say if I had to pick one though, it would probably be the Jack Zebra one. I just was on cloud nine for literally a week after I still think about that game and one of my all-time favorite games for North Melbourne for sure. If the club snags Maynard, what other free agent should they pursue halfback, in my opinion? I think it probably just depends on who's available at the end of the year and what like list spots we need to fill. I think a defender would be a really great pick if we could get somebody. I think as it stands at the moment, you know, Griffin Logue and Aiden Core are not getting a game in the side. Callan Dawson's having a run at the moment. I think he's been really solid the last couple of weeks. Charlie Comben obviously is in that traditional lockdown one-on-one defender, so can't really speak to him, and I think still the plan might be for him to move forward at some point in the next few seasons, which I'm all about, by the way. I think we need to figure out what kind of player we want Will Dawson to be, and there is a question about Will Dawson actually, so I'll put that here as well. It's talking about Will Dawson's like best position in the side, if it's back or forward. He played a great game forward in the VFL over the weekend, but I don't know if we knee-jerk reaction and A, bring him in straight away on the back of one really solid performance, and B, just lock him in as a forward because he played one really great game that was spoken about a lot over the weekend. It was an epic performance. He was great, and I think there's definitely a lot of potential there with him, but I also quite liked what I saw from Will Dawson last year when he played those couple of games in defence. So I don't think we need to make these decisions right away. I don't know in terms of like locking Dawson into one position or another. I think with Charlie Comben, I think he's been a great example. He started his career as a forward, then he moved back at the start of last year. He was a revelation down back. He's also been able to find some consistency in his body, because up until last season, Charlie Comben just could not get a clear run on the park. It was sort of injury after injury after injury. So regaining a bit of confidence in his body and in himself, and now he's been able to string, you know, a fair few amount of games together, and he's been able to back it up this season again. I think then making a move back forward is okay, and I think it's something we can have this discussion about. I think versatility is really underrated in players, in modern day players as well. I think there's a real benefit to be able to have players who are able to move and adjust as the team requires, as players around them change. In particular, we're looking at our backline now, and had you told me that Griffin Logue and Aiden Core would have been dropped after 6 rounds of the season, both fit, both, you know, being able to get a game up to that point, I probably wouldn't have believed you. But based on form right now, the past 2 weeks, our backline has looked the best. So in terms of Will Dawson in particular, I don't think we need to make a decision on where he stays and where his best football will be played. I think we bring him in based on a needs basis, either forward or back, and then make a decision after that. And then in terms of going to free agency and who we bring in, if we bring someone in addition to Maynard or whatever, like I said, I think it just depends on what kind of player we'd be looking for and where certain players are on our list as well, and what sort of change. I mean, like I said, there's still so long to go in the season. There obviously are needs that will still be the same. I think Jack Darling's definitely had a strong start to the year. He's teetered off a little bit over the past couple of weeks. I think the 10-day break will do him justice, but, you know, he's only there as a short-term fix, and it's how many times you're going to top players up, what kind of age profile or what kind of profile of a player, I guess, we're looking for. So right now, I'm not too sure. I think Brandon Maynard on him would be a good addition to our side. He's a really strong footballer, and we don't really have a lot of intimidating players on our list, at least physically imposing. We definitely have some guys who might look big and scary, but they just aren't. So he'd be someone I'd be keen to bring in on the right amount of money and the right length of a contract. That's something that I've been a bit hesitant on when hearing the initial reports. It just seemed like a crazy amount of money for a guy who's in his late 20s and a really long contract. I don't know if it's something I would agree with straight away, but time will tell. And, you always back the club in and the decisions they make, but that's probably where I sit on those topics if we bunch them sort of all together. What can we salvage from the season from here on and potentially after the bye? 5 wins ? I think this is an interesting one because I think about our season last year, and obviously we didn't win any games until after the bye, and the form we had post-bye, or particularly from the one West Coast game to the other West Coast game, was really, really strong. We won our 3 games in that patch, but we played some really good competitive football as well. Sitting here now, we're 1 win 7 losses and a lot more competitive performances on the park. I guess the other thing with the start of last season and the first half of last season, it's not even like we were losing games and they were close. Like, we were getting pelted every single week. I think the closest margin was like 6 or 7 goals in the opening half of the season, which is quite diabolical. So you definitely can see the improvement to the naked eye as you kind of watch the games from week to week and you compare them directly with, you know, what was displayed in the first half of last season. I still don't think that 6 wins for the season is unreasonable. Particularly late in the season, there are definitely games where some clubs would have the queue in the rack and we'd be able to, you know, snag a upset win here or there. You can't obviously bet on that, but there are definitely some winnable fixtures that would be coming up based on form. We've got Richmond in a couple of weeks and we play them twice before the end of the season. We play West Coast this season. St Kilda are kind of up and down. I wouldn't put it past us to maybe be able to challenge them later in the season. Maybe that's naive, I don't know. There are definitely some fixtures in there that I think we should be able to take it up to those respective sides. We play Melbourne again. I know it's at the MCG, but I wouldn't let that stop us. I definitely would back us in to still win at least 6 games for the year. I don't think that's unreasonable. And if it is, I apologise, but maybe I believe too much in this team. But there is that sort of saying, when it turns really, really quickly. And it kind of feels like in the last 2 weeks, we've been teetering on the edge of more wins and we've been teetering on the edge of actually breaking games open. So hopefully they don't tease us for too much longer and they can actually take that step and start to put a few 4-point performances together. So fingers crossed that our next win isn't too far away and it hopefully will put us on the path of a little bit more success and some more wins. Hopefully you guys are flying through these. Very interesting one, this one as well. Should we cut our losses and place CCJ on the long-term injury list to free up a spot in the mid-season draft? Don't hate the suggestion. I'd almost go a step further and say at the end of this year we just pay him out for his last year of his contract and move him along. He obviously injured his Achilles in the Good Friday game last year. He was on track for a return this year, but then had a setback in the off-season and we haven't really heard too much since. It's a really frustrating one with him because he is the player we really needed and he just absolutely failed in all terms of the word to step up to the plate, couldn't get consistent footy under his belt when given the opportunity, and then obviously unfortunately through injury the last sort of 15 months, and that's not his fault, that's unfortunate, but even before the injury he never really looked like it. Maybe he looked like he was starting to grow into it at the start of last year and then injury sort of cut him off. So it's an interesting one. I guess we would need to really identify before the mid-season draft what we needed and if there were any appropriate picks out there. I think that's probably the first step. Right now, sitting here, it seems like we would either need someone, probably a defender still. It's crazy. I feel like we sort of turned around and turned a corner with our defense. Now we've been pushed quite a few steps back with Core and Logue out of favour, and then Jackson Archer will now be sidelined for 8 weeks with a hamstring injury, a high-grade hamstring injury. So maybe a defender, potentially a small lockdown defender or a key position defender, one of the two, if there was an appropriate pick out there and someone we really felt could come in and have an immediate impact, then I don't know why we couldn't just throw someone a lifeline, especially with CCJ. You've obviously got Jack Darling playing that sort of ruck, like that second ruck role to support Sherry, and he's been doing a really great job forward in particular there as well. But then you've got the likes of Finbar Maley, who played his first game over on Thursday night and he showed heaps of promise, and I think he'll probably keep his spot at least for the next couple of weeks while Paul Curtis is on the sidelines. You also got Bryn Teakle, who I think is unlucky to not be getting a game in this side at the moment, but given Darling's role, there is really no need for him maybe at this stage at the moment. So he'd be someone I would bring in though ahead of CCJ, absolutely. And then we just spoke about Will Dawson before, and he had a great game up forward in the VFL, and potentially there's an opportunity for him to break into the side. So I would suggest that CCJ would be heavily out of favour even when he is fit and ready to return. So long-term injury list, yes. Would I just go that step further and cut our losses? Probably yes, to be honest. Question here on the VFL, based on the current form, and the VFL side has been off to a flyer. Like, they've been having an awesome start to the season. Who's likely to force their way into the team next? Something needs to give and the team mix needs a tweak. So I kind of disagree with this in a way. I'm a really big believer in consistency and continuity in the side as much as possible. I said this at the top, and only making changes where required. I actually think the last 2 weeks the mix has looked really, really good. And I know we aren't winning games, but we're definitely a lot closer to where we were 2 weeks ago against Carlton. I also think that maybe there's a lot of tired bodies out there, and the 10-day break would definitely give a lot of players a real hand. The two that probably come to mind, well, the first one that obviously comes to mind for me is Jackson Archer. He now will miss 8 weeks with that high-grade hamstring injury. I don't know who you'd look to bring in to replace him. My gut says Aiden Core comes back to replace him. I think that would be the best option at the moment. Josh Goda's still unavailable. We've got Luke McDonald in the side. I would probably avoid playing him and Darcy Tucker in the same side at the moment. I think we're kind of at this point with Darcy Tucker now where maybe he's not the first guy to come back and replace Jackson Archer. That no possession game sticks out in my mind now, and I'm going to think about that for a really, really long time. So I don't know if he'd be the player I'd be reaching for. I'd probably go with Aiden Core for the moment. He definitely is the best lockdown defender that is waiting on the wings, ready to go, that could fit in and play smaller where needed. Obviously, Jackson Archer is more of a mid-sized defender. So that's the player that I would be bringing in for Jackson Archer. The other one I want to talk about is Jacob Constanti. There's been a little bit of discussion around him and whether he keeps his spot in the side. He's maybe had a couple of quiet weeks. I really love the pressure and defensive pressure in the forward line that Jacob Constanti brings, and I really like his second, third efforts and the 1%ers. So maybe I view his game differently to others, but if there was a player I would be looking at to potentially give a go, maybe Cooper Harvey would get an opportunity in the side. I don't know if that's what I would do. I'm just sort of thinking about what may happen and potentially some changes we could see. So that's something I would definitely look out for. There's been a few calls to drop Jack Darling. I personally wouldn't drop Jack Darling, especially on the back of a 10-day break. I think he obviously really needed the rest, but I think with Jack Darling, what people forget is he's there to play a role to support those around him, and the way our forward line functions when he's in the side, and he's really taking away physical attention from a lot of other forwards in the forward line. He also does present really nicely at the ball, and he can be a really nice option up the ground. His experience is something, and his quality of play is something that a lot of players on our list waiting the wings don't have. So for now, I would still stick with JD. He's had a couple of quiet weeks, but I don't think that there is enough there to warrant his dropping. I also look at Finbar, and if we want someone to support Finbar and allow him to just kind of play the way he needs to play, then I think having Jack Darling in the side definitely is beneficial because he'll be able to support him physically. So I think thinking about those things and thinking outside the box with Jack Darling rather than what he does specifically in this side is really important. So they're probably the two I would be thinking about right now. And also one to throw into the mix is, of course, George Wardlaw. He was rested for the Essendon game, so you'd expect him to front up against Brisbane on Sunday. Maybe he comes in for the likes of a Bailey Scott. I know Bailey Scott was the sub, so maybe we reimagine the sub, or potentially Zane Dersma. But George definitely plays, and I would not drop Will Phil at the expense of George Wardlaw. That kind of leads me into a couple of questions that we did receive about Will Phillips and how he can retain his spot in the side. I'll leave those over here. And can he and George realistically play in the same side? Absolutely, they can. Will Phillips, I don't really see as the big possession guy. I see Will Phillips as kind of, if he's going to get anywhere between 10 to 15 touches a game, but back that up with 5+ tackles and 5+ clearances every week. That's the kind of role I'd want him to play if we need him to play a lockdown midfielder role, and potentially we would want him to do that because Brisbane's midfield is on fire at the moment, and it has been for the last 18 to 24 months. Then maybe we need to keep him in this side. He can go to one of the Ashcrofts, he can go to Lachie Neale, he can go to Josh Dunkley. Like, there's quite a few midfielders in there who he could match up on and try and minimise their impact if possible. I think Will Phillips, for a side that has up until the last 2 weeks allowed an opposition to score over 100 points against them every single week, having someone in the midfield there to sort of stop the flow and just sort of bring the game into a little bit more of a slog and a little bit more of a contest is so vital. Will Phillips, I guess, where he may lie out of favour with the coaches is if they've got a certain expectation, a certain standard that they want him to reach and he just isn't doing it. Now, we as supporters and, you know, sitting in the audience are never going to know. We can only look at what the team's giving us week in, week out and how we feel like he could probably impact it. And obviously we've all got our own opinions and we've got our own potential gripes as well, but I definitely would like to keep Will Phillips in the side. I made a comment a few weeks back that maybe he would be the one to make way for George Wardlaw when he was actually fit and ready to go back into the side, and a few people called me out and said, I was waiting for you to scapegoat him. I want Will Phillips in the side. Make no mistake about that. It's got nothing to do with what I think. It's got everything to do with what I think the coaches are going to think. And that's where that comment came from. And that's where this comment comes into it as well. Will Phillips, I thought, was great on the weekend. Like I said, he had those 15 touches, so it was not really a lot of the ball, but the way that he was able to support his work with tackling pressure and with clearance work, that work rate and that work ethic is exactly what we need in this side. So I would really hope that we can keep him in there. He is a real confidence player, so give him, you know, a run of 8 games and just let him do what he needs to do. I think that's how we're going to get the best out of Will Phil, and that's how we're going to maximize his impact. Fingers crossed that just comes to fruition. I think that is where I will leave all the questions for today. Thank you so much again to everyone who did send your questions in. I really like doing these Q&A style videos with you, a little bit more relaxed. We can have a bit of a chat. Let me know your thoughts on any of the topics that we brought up in today's video in the comments down below. If you ever have any questions or ever want to have a chat about North, you can do so over on socials, Kanga TV Show on X, Instagram, Facebook, and also email if you are that way inclined. I will be back in a couple of days as we start to look ahead to our round 9 clash against the Lions, our second last home game in Tasmania. If you have anything you need before then, you know where to find me. Otherwise, I'll see you a little bit later in the week. Go Roos.